So this morning, I'm going to talk about the root of lineage. And if you can't hear me, please raise your hand or something. So I'll try to talk loud enough so that everyone can hear me. So the root of lineage. Lineage in Zen practice is highly emphasized. And partly, I believe, this is because it's an Asian tradition that has been passed down to us. And Asian traditions honor the elders in a way that we really don't do here in Western culture. But we can't really see where we're going to go in the future unless we know where we've been in the past. So it's a good thing to know something about the ancestors and the Buddhas, and what they've brought to us and why we honor them in the way we do. The Buddhas and ancestors, the lineage of a Zen priest, is unique to each particular temple. So because each individual has a different teacher, and that teacher has a different teacher. And so it's a very wide field in which all of these different ancestors and Buddhas appear. I have no idea how many Zen lineages there are, and we are just in Soto Zen. So there are other schools of Zen besides Soto Zen as well. And in Soto Zen, we had the lineage chart. I don't know if it's still on the wall upstairs in Cedar Hall or not. We used to have it hanging up there, and it was huge. And that was just for Soto Zen. So there are lots of Buddhas and ancestors out there. But we honor the ones that make our temple unique. So this morning, in the dedication, after we chanted Makahanya, you heard Bob say Tokuo Ryoko, who was the founder of Ensuji Temple. We honored him. Tokuo Ryoko, Ensuji Temple, I should say first, is the home temple of our temple in Japan. Nihoroshi is the abbot there, and it is also known for being the temple where the great poet and hermit Ryokan-san practiced, and he was briefly abbot of that temple before he ran away. Much more common than you might think. So Tokuo Ryoko founded over 200 temples in Japan. He was an amazing teacher. He spread seeds everywhere. So one of his seeds was Ensuji Temple, which I think they celebrated their 400th anniversary not that long ago, within the last 10 years. I know that Edo-san went to Japan for that. And so Tokuo Ryoko founded Ensuji, and then Nihoroshi is the abbot there. And so we also, Katsuyu Tetsumi, that's Nihoroshi, and we honored him. And then we also honored a virtuous model around the world, great teacher, Daigu Ryokan. So that's poet and hermit Ryokan-san. And then in this particular temple, we don't honor Edo-san, but when I had my own meditation group, we also said Katsuyu Edo because she was the founder of our group. So we always honor the people who have passed the Dharma on to us. So I've been privileged in the last year to be a part of a group that was working on a commentary on the Denkoroku. The Denkoroku is also called the record of the transmission of the light. So what the Denkoroku is, and this is a Shasta Abbey translation, I don't know if you can see that. It's the Enlightenment stories of the first 53 ancestors. And this was transcribed from a series of Dharma talks given by Keizan Joken, who is the fourth ancestor after Eihei Dogen. So he's the founder of Soto Zen in Japan. He brought Soto Zen, which wasn't called that then. He brought Zen Chan from China to Japan. And Keizan Joken was the fourth Dharma heir after him. Keizan was an interesting individual. He started a lot of temples himself as well. I think it's about 7 temples that he started in Japan. But he was also dedicated to Kanzeon practice, the bodhisattva of compassion, mainly because both his mother and his grandmother were deeply dedicated to that bodhisattva. So he was the first person in Japan, the first teacher in Japan to ordain women. And he also started a women's monastery. So the first Nisodo in Japan. So he had a particular emphasis on practice for women. And he also brought Zen practice out of the monasteries into the temples and put more emphasis on practice for lay people and services to lay people. So he opened it up. And in this way, he spread Soto Zen in a wider way, he and his disciples, than it might have been spread otherwise if it had stayed focused in the monasteries. So he was a very active ancestor in spreading the Dharma. So whenever this particular book, which I highly recommend that you read if you want to find out things about the ancestors, because the stories are very different from one ancestor to another. And so this particular book it starts out with the actual small story about the Enlightenment incident, and which can be catalyzed by a lot of different things. And then it goes into the background of that particular person, just a little bit about him, where he was from, what his mom and dad did, what a prodigy he was as a young person. Perhaps not all of them were prodigies. One of the people in here was a wizard for a lot of years before he actually came to the Dharma, had lots of followers himself. So there's a lot of interesting stories in here. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the commentary that I was working on come out, because so in this case, we have the little story about the Enlightenment experience. We have the story of the biography of the person. And then we have Keizan's commentary on the story and on that person, and what that person's enlightenment experience, how it affects our practice today. So we have these many ancestors that have been enlightened, and they have passed that down to us through their own Dharma heirs. And that is how we got here in this place today. Edo-san was transmitted by Nihoroshi, and she came and she manifested this place with a lot of help, of course. But without her, it would not have appeared. So the Dharma appears in the real world in this way, by transmission from one person to another. Here we had Edo and Nihoroshi, and she always says, this is Nihoroshi's temple. And this is the temple that she made for, to honor him, to honor his transmission of the Dharma to her. And this is the way it works for each temple for each Zen temple in this country and in Japan, in that we honor the ancestor from whom we received the Dharma, and we try to manifest that Dharma in this way. So this is a big manifestation, this place right here. We moved in here 5 years after Edo-san came back from Japan. That's an extraordinarily short time to manifest a temple. So that shows the depth of her practice that she manifested this. Now, this book comes from Shasta Abbey, and Reverend Master Jikyo Kennett is the woman who manifested Shasta Abbey, and boy, did she have big practice. I don't know how many priories they have, but there's a main monastery down in Mount Shasta in California. There's one in Britain, and I'm not remembering the name of it right now. There's one in Germany. And so her practice was really big, and it manifested in a big way. And she transmitted the Dharma to a lot of people. So when you're transmitted as a teacher, you are given a charge that you will not allow the Dharma to die out. You're given this, you vow not to let the Dharma die out. So this is a precious gift that we have received from our ancestors, and it's not, that's why we chant the names of the ancestors during morning practice, daily morning practice, and we dedicate the chanting of the sutras to the Buddhas and the ancestors in deep gratitude for their gift to us of the Dharma itself. And the other thing I think about when I read these stories of the Denkoroku is how dedicated these people were to practice itself, to meditation, to zazen, how dedicated those people were. There are a lot of instances in which it says in the story that that person never allowed his ribs to touch the mat during the rest of his life, which means that that person sat in meditation all night and never slept. Not that they didn't sleep, but there's these little chin supports. They're, long that you put under your chin when you're meditating so that you can stay up all night. But that was one of the ways in which people demonstrated their dedication to zazen, was to just remain in zazen all the time. And this is also our practice, is that we remain in zazen all the time. No matter what we are doing in our day, our practice is to remain in zazen. So perhaps you also find a way to remain in zazen while you're sleeping at night. I don't know. I have no instruction for that myself. So the other person, the person who gave the commentary on the Denkoroku is Inoue Gien Roshi, who also, and we have this other book from Inoue Gien Roshi, which Temple Ground Press, which Edo-san started, printed just a couple of years ago, a blueprint of enlightenment. And I I really do recommend this book to you because when I first read the commentary that goes along with this, it's a commentary on Dogen Zenji's guidelines for studying the way. But I went, oh, wow, I really wish I would have had this when I was first studying Zen, because I made things way too complicated. And he really emphasizes the simplicity of the practice. And it's just an excellent, excellent manual for people who are studying Zazen. So he is also, that's the commentary that's going on with this Denkoroku. And I will let you know as soon as it is published. And I think the first volume, they hope to get it out this year. Yeah, I was going to say, we started a new year, so yeah, it'd be this year. But Gien Roshi was a very amazing teacher in Japan too. He started a number of temples, and a number of really well-known teachers were his students because he was a thoroughly enlightened person. And how did he get to be thoroughly enlightened? Well, this man had his enlightenment experience, but he realized that he still thought he was enlightened. So as long as he had the thought of enlightenment, he was not thoroughly enlightened. And he spent the next, I don't remember how many years it was, but it was in post-war Japan when things were very bad. People were starving. And he had 5 sons and his wife. And here he was sitting zazen all day because he still had this idea that he was enlightened. So he pushed on through until that idea was gone. And he was a very thoroughly enlightened teacher. And it shows in the way that he teaches, because it is simplicity itself. If you're really complicated, you have to think about how wise you really are. So we call out all these people. Now, Gien Roshi is not in our lineage, so we don't call him out, but I highly respect him. Yeah, and we highly respect people who we know are enlightened just because of the way they are. We know it because of how they are. We can feel it with our bodies. So there is, we also talk about Ryokan-san, and he was a practitioner of the Zen arts. He was a poet and a calligrapher, and he was a wandering monk. And so he transmitted the Dharma, even though he never had any students of his own. He transmitted the Dharma by being who he was. And he would exchange his poetry or his paintings for food in his wanderings. He was another amazingly dedicated person in that he often suffered from cold and hunger. He wearing only his robe, going around Japan in the wintertime with just the robe and his bowl. And his bowl had a crack in it. So but he cherished that bowl. He cherished that bowl and carried it with him everywhere he went. So we have these arts that we teach in Zen practice that are handed down to us from one teacher to another as well. Just like we had poetry night this last Friday, and people brought the poems that they had written to that meeting to read to each other. And this is a deep tradition here at Olympia Zen Center, because Edo-san is always also a poet, a painter, a calligrapher. And we have had many classes in these kinds of things. So we look forward every year to reading our New Year's poems to each other. And these are handed down, these practices are handed down through Zen instructions. So every time you go to a temple, just like those of you who came for the first time and were taken through instruction by Genjo-san here, there's a particular way that you're instructed to do everything. And these are instructions that have been handed down for centuries to us, even though starting with Dogen Zenji, who told us how to sit zazen. The zazen instructions that I would give were directly from Dogen Zenji. So these are things that are ancient and that we preserve by passing them on to others. Every lineage does things a little differently because each teacher does things differently. The Dharma comes through a teacher's personality. So the Dharma might be a little bit funnier in the case of some teachers, or it might be a little more formal, or it might be very relaxed. But the Dharma comes through this vessel, through this vessel, in that way, in each particular unique constellation of personality. So you will get a different flavor at every temple, and each temple does things a little bit differently. So you always go to instruction when you get to a temple, even if you think you know everything, because that temple will do things differently than you do. And it's only polite to go and get instructed in how you should proceed. So that's another aspect of lineage. So the teacher is a lineage holder. When you receive transmission, you are given the lineage to pass on to other people. And the teacher does this by ordination. So in the case of a monk, there's Tokudo when the monk starts their priest training. So in Zen, you don't get ordained at the end of your training. Your training begins when you are ordained. And you may or you may not receive transmission at the end of your training period. Some people choose not to go any farther than that. Some people are not suitable to go any farther than that. Some people remain black-robed monks for the rest of their lives. But that is also of service. That is also a way to transmit the lineage, even though one has not been given the lineage to hold as a lineage holder. So I want to be clear here now, because I'm going to start talking about transmitting the lineage, but only a teacher can transmit the lineage for a priest for another priest, or for a lay person. And in the case of the lay person, this is called receiving the precepts. So a teacher, a lineage holder, can transmit that lineage to another monk, and can make a monk, they can make a priest, and they can also make that priest a Dharma heir by transmitting the lineage to them through a special ceremony, which is held in private. And then as far as transmitting the lineage to lay people, this is done like all of the people here who are wearing rakusu. That lineage has been transmitted to them by giving them the precepts. So you can decide that you want to become a Buddhist, and you will receive the precepts from the teacher, And to do that, you sew your own little robe, which is what the rakusu is. And you sew your own little robe and you give it to the teacher. And then the teacher gives it back to you along with your lineage papers. So you are given lineage papers that start with Shakyamuni Buddha and list all the names of the ancestors all the way down to you at the bottom. And this is the bloodline of the Buddha that is transmitted from one person to another. This precious gift that we were given so long ago, and that all of these dedicated people have continued to pass along to us. So in this way, and this is a point I think is not emphasized enough, Sangha, that's you, all of you in this room. Sangha carries the lineage, and everybody on Zoom too, sorry. Sangha carries the lineage. And how does Sangha do that? Sangha carries the lineage by learning the forms, by learning how to bow, by learning how to enter the zendo, by learning the chants, by learning how to be a doan, or how to be a kokyo, someone who leads the chanting, or by learning how to hit the han before zazen starts, or learning how to cook in the kitchen and serve food during retreats, or refreshments after zazen, like we're going to have today. So that's the way that Sangha transmits the lineage. And that's really important because every time someone comes here to practice with us, lineage is transmitted. It's important to be able to know how to do these things, how to clean the altars, how to take care of the library, how to answer the emails in the office. Without Sangha, we are nothing. So we have the Buddha and the ancestors who have transmitted this Dharma to us. We have the teacher who represents Dharma, and we have the Sangha, the three treasures of Buddhism. And we cannot exist without all of those pieces. We need those pieces in order to transmit the Dharma. So our Sangha is going through a big transition now. Our teacher has retired, and we have Genjo, who is helping us to hold ourselves together. And so there are a lot of fears and hopes for our Sangha here. But the roots of lineage do not die out. Even if we close this place tomorrow and scatter to the four winds, the roots of lineage still exist within you. However much you might have had contact with it, the roots of lineage still exist within you. If you are sincere in your practice, you will transmit throughout your life, just like Ryokan did when he was wandering around the countryside, both within the Sangha and outside of it, because you're in Zazen all the time. In Zen, we have a deep respect for things that are old, even if they're broken or torn. You'll see monks going around with patches on their clothes, maybe patches on their robes. In the Denkoroku, they're always talking about patch-robed monks. If you are a truly enlightened person, you are a patch-robed monk. So we always have this deep respect for that. We use it and we reuse it and we use up each thing out of respect for the Dharma. I heard a very touching story one time about a monk some monks wear a sort of a loincloth as underwear. And this monk took such good care of his underwear. He washed it very carefully. He took great care of it, but inevitably it finally started to fail. And then he used it as a rag for a little while. And then finally it just wasn't just falling to pieces in his hands. So he took it very carefully and buried it with deep respect. That's the way we treat everything in our lives. If we are careless, then we are not respecting the Dharma. So because we respect everything that is ancient, whether it's broken or torn, our Sangha here might seem a little bit cracked or a little bit wobbly, but we respect it. And we, as long as each one of us continues to transmit the lineage in our daily lives, practice continues. The Sangha continues. So it never dies as long as practice lives here. Yes, Bill.
I just wanted to bow to.
He bowed. Bill bowed.
Now you decided to do so.
Mhm.
It's your.
Are you offering time for questions? Can people ask
Do we have
questions?
time? I don't have time.
Do actually. 11:20. Yeah.
We have a little time for questions or comments, if you'd like to make questions or comments.
I'll go. You mentioned enlightenment experiences several times, and my understanding is that if you look a generation or maybe two, I don't remember, after Keizan Zenji, there's a major branching of the lineage chart. And what I think I remember being told is part of that branching is a difference in interpretation around the importance of an enlightenment experience.
Yes.
Is there something you could add to that, to my understanding?
Well, probably not a lot, but I know about the branching, and I know that we're in the branch that teaches awakening. We emphasize awakening. Gien Roshi does too. It is, I mean, what it is to awaken to what truly is, how our world truly is, how we create a world that isn't there, and we think it's real. And it's important to be able to know with this that what true reality is. So this is where we are aiming in Zazen, even though we don't aim, where that's a goal, even though we don't have a goal. It's a gate that we're going to pass through, even though we don't have any gates. So it's important. And to not speak about awakening, I can't imagine that. It's important to speak about awakening. Awakening is here. Awakening can be done in this modern place. All you have to do is make the effort and be open to it. As G.U. Kennett used to say, you make yourself susceptible to lightning. You sit on the cushion and you ask to be it. So it's an important part of Zazen. It's the whole of Zazen, really. Can I?
Jikyo,
Yes.
I just want to say before we sign off, there are 2 copies of that chart of the ancestors, and I have one of them.
Okay.
So if the one, I think that we just took it down from the library because there wasn't any room to post it. But if it doesn't turn up, I will give mine.
I'm sure it's here somewhere, and we'll dig it out.
Try behind the bookcase.
Behind the bookcase. Thank you, Mickey. Yes. Yes.
Yes, I have a question about, so I guess the center of the question has to do with meditation, engaging with one's mind, right? To observe one's mind. The more specific question is the Zen school and this, or Zen Buddhism in this school, what is its perspective, or can you speak anything about how it relates to psychology and philosophy? I know this sounds like big question, but I guess I'm just interested to hear your some words.
Okay. Well, I have a degree in psychology, but what I would say is that words really have nothing to do with this. What our practice is beyond language. So I don't know. Did you guys hear that question? I'm sorry, I didn't repeat it. Okay. So what do psychology and philosophy have to do with this? I think Buddhism has really been contaminated by psychology, in America in particular, because it's just something that has happened over the last few decades. And from my perspective, you do your psychological work outside the Zendo. You come to the Zendo and you sit in Zazen, and all of this stuff arises. You see you see your true condition. You see how you really are. And the point of Zazen is to just be with that as much as you can, to be with the suffering in your life, to notice it, to allow it to pass on. Because as long as we're grabbing it and trying to solve it, we're grabbing it, we're attached. And our practice is to release attachments. This is not an easy thing to do if you're a person who has been traumatized. And I don't recommend meditation to people who have been deeply traumatized. They have other work to do before you, because this is to face one's condition, to truly face one's condition and be with it. This is a very difficult practice. And so that's where I am with philosophy and psychology, is that it doesn't really help you when you get in there and start looking at yourself. It's just a bunch of words and theories, ideas that we have in our culture about behavior and how we should control it, perhaps. And this is not what we do in Zazen. We want to be with what we are and let go of it. Continue to clear it all out until there's nothing there. So you have to have a self in order to do that, which is why you do your psychological work outside the Zendo, so you can figure that piece of it out. But then you come in order to do away with that story you've been telling yourself about who you are all your life. Oh, for God's sake, let go. Did you have a question, my dear?
I do, yes, thank you. Thank you for speaking about lineage. This is all quite new to me, and so it's very helpful to hear you break it down. So am I correct in understanding that in order for, let's say, Olympia Zen Center to continue, someone who received direct transmission from Edo-san would need to step into the role of Abbot, or I'm not sure what the language is. And that's true. It must be someone directly a student of Edo-san.
Okay, so the question is, is it true that in order for Olympia Zen Center to continue, someone who is a direct student of Edo-san's has to step into her shoes? This is the ideal situation, but the truth of the matter is, even though I am her Dharma heir, I have a terminal illness, so I wouldn't be able to undertake that job. Plus, I'm an old lady. So it's not going to happen. We won't be able to have somebody who is of our lineage, of Nihiroshi's lineage, to take over this temple. Now, I have to say, to put that in perspective, that this is happening in many Zen temples in the US, that the teacher is retiring and there is no Dharma heir to take their place. So in that instance, one would look for someone whose lineage is as close to your lineage as possible. So you would start going up the lineage tree. But I'm not even sure that in that case, there would be someone that you would be able to find someone. So Zen in America at this time is kind of in a shaky place itself, in that the generation that Edo-san belongs to and the people on either side of that generation are retiring, or they're dying, or passing on in one way or another, and there isn't a generation coming along behind them to take their place. So that's a very big difficulty. But there are places, I don't know how far with this I should go. But in this particular case, we've had Genjo step in here as an interim person to hold the space while we're looking for someone. So I'm thinking that in the US right now, what the best we could probably do is to make sure that any teacher that we ask to come here believes in teaching about awakening. We would need to make sure that that teacher was in that stream, because that's really important. That's the important thing. And I would also say that while I was researching about Keizan Jokin in preparation for this talk, I ran across a statement about Sojiji, which is the one of the Soto Zen headquarters in Japan. And they have rotating abbots. So they have abbots from different lineages all the time. And I know that San Francisco Zen Center does this too. The abbot serves for like 5 years, and then there's another person who is brought forward to serve as the abbot. Of course, they have a rather large pool to choose from there too, but so it's not unusual then for someone to come in and run the temple, even though they are not of that lineage. So it's ideal to have a Dharma heir from your teacher's lineage, but it's not always possible to follow that particular tradition. Yeah.
Gratitude for your answer and your vulnerability.
Thank you.
For that.
Anyone else?
Probably about time.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you so much for being here today. Oh, I'm sorry, Joan.
Name of the book? The
Pardon?
name of the book on the ancestors. What was that?
It's the Denkoroku. Can you read that? The Denkoroku? Here, let me open it up. It's too shiny.
Koroku. Got it.
Yes. And this is Shasta Abbey's translation, and you wouldn't be able to get it from Amazon because it's free. You have to go to Shasta Abbey to get a copy of it or write them or something. Yeah, but they give them away. Okay. All right.
Buddha.